Gino, how are you doing?
Great, Ryan. How are you?
Doing good. I am so excited to have you on the show. As you and I were just talking, I have had lots of your followers and implementers on the show. Everybody's got great, amazing stories, and you have attracted and built one heck of a legacy, Gino. And I'm very, very honored to have you on the show. Some people might not have heard of you, and it was actually a shock to me. My business partner, Gino, is out of Ohio, and we were doing one of our growth and exit boot camps, and no one had heard of EOS, and I was like, I don't understand. So it's just to show you my surprise of people that hadn't heard of this. But you have just recently came out with a new book, Entrepreneurial Leap. And so maybe for the listeners that may or may not be familiar with you, maybe kind of give us the quick little Cliff Note version, and then we can kind of jump into the premise of your new book.
Yeah, I would love it. So the premise is this, speaking to what you started with, I spent the last 20 years of my life building EOS and EOS Worldwide to help 10 to 250 person privately held companies really run like Swiss watches. And my whole life for the last 30 years has been entrepreneurship, but it's been focused on companies that are running. And what I decided 10 years ago is I want to put my energy into the front end of the entrepreneurial journey when I get to age 50, which is what I started doing 2 years ago. And this is a project that's all about helping an entrepreneur in the making. And so anyone 16 to 60 years old that thinks they might be an entrepreneur, really helping them understand if entrepreneurship is right for them, if they have what it takes, and exactly how to take a leap that will greatly increase their odds of success and give them a huge jumpstart on becoming entrepreneurs.
And I'm so excited to dive into the book because it's a fantastic book. And I think I also was going back and kind of brushing up on some of the other books in Rocket Fuel. You talked about teaching what we wish we would have known. And so I don't know, maybe kind of give us the background of, like, when you said that you wanted to go back to the front end, what were some of the gaps that you saw in order to actually create the book?
Yeah, well, the way I describe it, and so that exact quote you're referencing is, we teach what we needed the most. And that's a quote by Danielle Kennedy. And what that means is I'm basically teaching my 18-year-old self, because I go back to when I was 18 and I knew I was different from most of my friends, and I was a mislabeled derelict, and I was insecure and confused, and I had no freaking idea what I was going to do, because they were all going off to college and following this academic path. And here I am thinking there's no way on earth I am going to spend another day in academia. And so, it took me until about age 28 till I really realized what I was. And I just wish I would have had this content then. And so that's what it's all about, is teaching my 18-year-old self, and anyone out there that really feels like, they've got this entrepreneurial DNA.
So I want to peel that apart. Like, what is an entrepreneur? When you said you were 28 and you finally figured out what you were, and it's funny because I can relate. Like, when you're not paying everybody, like my schooling experience when I was listening to your book is very similar. We're like Ryan's really nice, but he talks a lot. It's just like, I don't belong in this classroom. So when you said you figured out what you were, and I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm obviously a younger generation than you, but like entrepreneurship has become more of a fad now than it was probably when you were 28. So how did you figure that out, and what is your definition of an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I'll let the cat out of the bag first in terms of what is an entrepreneur. And so in all of my work in the last 3 decades, and a whole lot of research leading up to this book, and interviews with tons of visionary entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs, I've concluded that there are 6 essential traits that every true entrepreneur has. And to quickly give you those, they are visionary, passionate, problem solver, driven, risk taker, and responsible. And so if you roll those all up into one big ball, there's a 4 or 5 page riff I do in the book that just paints this vivid color of all the characteristics of an entrepreneur. And so it's kind of a wild and crazy person. It's a person that has lots of ideas, and they're passionate, and they're driven, and they're hard charging, and they're intense, and there's a lot of good and there's a lot of bad. And so when I say I realized what I was, all of that craziness that I had experienced all my life, I realized that I could channel it into something really amazing, and that it truly is a thing. And I'm not, if my parents were accountants and they forced me to go to college to become an accountant, I would have been labeled an idiot, because that's, it would have been the antithesis of what I'm genetically encoded to do.
Well, and so when you go through, when I was listening to the different traits, and I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. Check, check, check. But what I find interesting, and I want you to maybe explain, you can't miss one of them. And you did probably the best job, Gino, I've ever heard explaining what an entrepreneur is and what they aren't. Because right now, everybody could be an entrepreneur if they got a freelance gig. So maybe explain why you can't miss one of those, and maybe explain what is not an entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's great. And as I lead into that, I want to touch on something you said there, and that is, this has been my life for 30 years. And so I'm not making this shit up, and it's all from the real world. So this is what I've been surrounded by my whole life. This was what my dad was. This was the family business I took over. And so it's been in my blood and around me every minute of every day for the last 30 years. So again, I just know it. And so that helps the content flow freely. But again, it's from the real world. Mm-hmm. And with that, these 6 essential traits, you have to have all 6. And so it's, always so painful for me when somebody says, well, what if I'm missing one? Can I still do this? Or I think I'm only missing one, but I think I can still take the leap. Unfortunately, that's just not the reality. You have to have all 6 to be a true entrepreneur. It doesn't say you can't be a solopreneur, a freelancer, so it's not saying you can't be self-employed in a one-man show. But to be a true entrepreneur, one of the greatest of all time, you got to have all 6. You can take any one of those away, and it's just not the complete formula. And then just say that last. So what was the last question you wanted me to answer?
So it was that was one of it. And then I think because when you look at those, you can't do all that and then not take a risk or not be passionate about. Because I still even with what I've been doing over the last 5 years. Because to put it into context and go back to that second question, Gino, about what is not is I took over the family business and helped I got the shit kicked out of me for 6 years, helping turn it around, and then going back and then doing a startup, which is where you don't have cash flow, you literally have to be 10 times more passionate about it because you get even the crap kicked out of you even more.
Oh yeah.
What I thought was really interesting is because I'm in the process of writing my own book, and people are like, oh, you can interchange entrepreneur and business owner, or second gen. And you had some really good criteria of what's not an entrepreneur. And maybe it was just to kind of set the foundation, the person that's got a side hustle or someone that takes over as second gen and just, has the status quo. So maybe explain to someone does that make sense?
Yeah. So that prompts it. And I think the best way to describe it is this. So I had this aha moment in a Starbucks debating a professor of entrepreneurship. And we had this great debate that led to this clarity. And so the clarity is this, it's in the book, and it's called the entrepreneurial range. And so for your audience, if they can picture in their mind this arc, if you will, and on the far left end of the arc is what I call self-employed people. And on the far right end of the arc, I call that true entrepreneur. And so, every self-employed person that has their own business is somewhere on that range. Mm-hmm. And if we go to the far left end of the range, it's still admirable and respectable what these people are doing, but these are the one-man shows, the solopreneurs, the freelancers, the person that buys one franchise, the person that has a lifestyle business. And then all the way to the right end of the spectrum are the greatest entrepreneurs of all time. Walt Disney, Henry Ford, Elon Musk, Oprah Winfrey. And so you can think of all the greatest. So what this content is all about, and this book is all about, are the people on the right end of that range. And so I'm not knocking the left end of the range, but when I talk about these 6 essential traits, those are the kind of people that we're talking about that literally go out and create and build something in the world and build organizations with many people. And that's 10 to 10 million. Mm-hmm. So, but truly build organizations and create things in the world.
Well, and so as we continue down kind of the sequence of the book and the whole concept behind this is when you've identified an entrepreneur, you say, okay, where am I in that range? What I love about the book, and I wish I would have done it in my second iteration of it as an entrepreneur, is intentionality. And that's a lot about what we preach in our practice too, is why are you doing this? And you explain, you say that, okay, you maybe go into the success rates of entrepreneurship and why that this book and why you're explaining what are some of the questions that people should be asking that are helping them identify of what they should be doing. Because, and maybe some background behind that, Gino, I see with the hundreds of entrepreneurs that I work with, a lot of it actually, I'll go back is, Gino, when I started this podcast, I would go, tell me when you decided to become an entrepreneur. You know what most people said? I'm I didn't choose to, I accidentally became one. So there was like this weird, like they wish they probably would have had this book to actually have some intentionality of what they were doing and why. So maybe go back and say, okay, what are some of the questions and why are there the failure rates and how do you identify what would be good for you?
You bet. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give your listener kind of a huge context, the context of the content and the mission in the book. And that is, this book is broken into three parts. Part one is confirm. Part two is glimpse. Part three is path. The confirm part one is all about, first and foremost, confirming that you even are and that you have these 6 essential traits and that you are a true entrepreneur. And that we've just covered. And so now what you're going into are these next two parts. And I want to pull both of them together to answer your question, because part two is all about glimpse. And that's then taking this person that is a true entrepreneur in the making and showing them a glimpse of all of their options and what life looks like. And it truly lights a true entrepreneur up. And so there's countless real world stories of people who are where they were right now and how they got to where they got to. Then I go into all of the options. So the industries, the types of businesses, the size of businesses, B2B, B2C, product business, service business, high end, low volume, low price, high volume. And so with that, there are literally 10,000 options for that entrepreneur in the making sitting there listening right now. Mm-hmm. Then I show them a day in the life, both good and bad, and the 8 mistakes to avoid. So that piece I want to come back to in just a second, and then this will answer your question. Because now as we go to the third part of the book, I then get into the path for how to make it a reality, reduce the amount of mistakes you're going to make, and increase your odds, which are things like, should you go to college or not, if you're at that age to decide, the importance of passion, the importance of having a mentor, 10-year thinking, and then 8 disciplines, and then 9 stages. And all that said, to your point about intention, because this is a mouthful, if you understand that kind of flow of the content, it's truly this psychological journey of soul searching for this individual to say, okay, I am one. Holy cow, look at all of these options. And then I have this really cool tool on the website called My Biz Match, where they click, 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 and out gives them an answer in terms of the perfect industry, business, size, type for them to kind of move toward and start to tinker with. So you talk about intention, that starts to clarify that intention. And then as we get into those path elements, there's a tool called My Vision Clarifier, which gets them to really think about what the passion is, discover what the passion is, because passion is so vital, why they're doing this, what the product is, who their customer is, what the pricing model is, what the 10-year goal is. And so again, it's a mouthful that I'm giving you, and we can drill down on any of that, but that's all crystallizing intention for that entrepreneur so that when they take their leap, absolutely, they are in their sweet spot. They're doing what they're passionate about, so they can endure the ass kicking they're going to take that you so well described.
Well, and we're going to peel a couple of those parts back, and I appreciate the context, because I think once you see the picture and the flow, then we can dive into this. And why I was excited to talk about this book on the show is because regardless of whether you have a company right now, because like I was telling you before we got on the recording, I get a lot of people that call me and say, I want to buy a business. And then there's a lot of people that are listening that are in the middle of their journey. But I think, Gino, and I don't know what your experience is, but a lot of people didn't go into that intentionally because they found a random problem that needed to be solved. One of their customers was able to like fund their startup because they were able to go off on their own. But maybe going into the different types of businesses, services, and all that stuff, and how that might impact what you like. And I'll lay some groundwork, Gino, because I personally went through this when I say that it was not intentional. So my dad started it in the copier business, right? So selling boxes and servicing them, transaction based, not very solution based. And then when I got it there, the whole industry was moving to managed services. So we realized and the whole industry did through absolutely horrible pain, that those are way different. And like how you're working with your customers, your type of customers, type of profitability, type of intimacy, and like, it just happened over time as the industry evolved. But I wish we would have had a lens to say, what business should we not be in or not be in? And Rob Dubay, who's been on the show, he stuck to managed print. And then there's other people that are in our industry that just stuck to copiers or just stuck to IT. So, I mean, you don't have to use those examples, but like, can you explain how the different kind of jigsaw puzzle pieces you're talking about might impact different personality types?
Yeah, I would love to. So this topic just alone, we could spend an hour on. And so I'll give you the 5-minute version because number one, I don't know that there's anyone even doing what I'm about to share and what I put in this book. And so this was another light bulb moment that I'm so excited about. But the point is, it's you as the entrepreneur in the making out there, choosing the right business for you and knowing what you're built for, because we're all built for something different. And so I'm going to use me as an example, but shoot forward in time to today. The business for me is training and education and service-based and B2B selling. That's what I am built for, equipped for, and I excel at doing. Put me in the copy machine business and I'd be out of business in 3 months flat because I have no passion for it. I have utter disdain for inventory. And so I have the luxury of knowing what I'm built for. And so now let's go back to the template. So when I talk about this My Biz Match on the website, it's free, e-leap.com. You can go there, you just literally click away at everything I'm about to say, and out pops this perfect answer for you. But there are literally hundreds of industries to choose from. And so start there. All of a sudden, this entrepreneur that wants to take a leap or buy a business, first you got to choose the industry that you're drawn to. From there, you got to just pick the type of company that you're drawn to. And then when we get into type of company, then we start to talk about, are you more of a product person or a service person, as I alluded to just a minute? So do you love products, either making products, distributing products, having inventory, touching and feeling that stuff? I have clients that love products and they love being in the product business. As I already disclosed, I have utter disdain for it. And then there's the service business where you love selling the intangible. You love selling services. And then we go a level deeper. Are you more of a B2B person or a B2C person? B2B is business to business, where you're typically selling to businesses. You have a smaller number of clients. You typically call those clients, and they're a little more intimate relationships. B2C is typically lots of customers that you have out there, less intimate relationships. This isn't a steadfast rule, but do you love selling to customers or do you love selling to businesses? And again, for me, I'm just masterful at selling to businesses. I'm masterful at selling to the business owner that owns that business. Again, it's what I'm built for. Then we go a level deeper. How big do you want the business to be? There are entrepreneurs that are built for a $1 million business or a $1 billion business or something in between. Not every entrepreneur is capable of building a $50 million, $100 million, billion-dollar company. And there's no shame in having a $5 million company that throws off $1 million profit. And then we go a level deeper. Are you a premium, high-priced, high-value, low-volume type of a business, or are you low-cost, high-volume? You're the cheapest price in town, high-volume, and that's what you're competing on. All of it's great. All of it works, but you have to pick and know. And all of a sudden, you kind of click, go through all that in your mind or with that tool, out pops this perfect answer that's going to help draw you toward the business you're built for. And if you put your energy into a business you're built for, you just increased your odds of success, like I described. If I went
and passion, right? I mean, and passion, because you have to be passionate about it.
Absolutely. It's all passion. As soon as you go, ooh, that's really intriguing to me, all of a sudden there's a little glimmer of passion. And each time you say, ooh, that makes sense, that makes sense, that makes sense, you just start getting clearer and clearer and clearer. And passion, as you say that, that's a whole chapter, that's a whole topic, that's a whole other conversation. But I hope that answers your question.
It does. And I think it's, like you said, I have never really seen it articulated that way, Gino. And I think about, for people that are about to start, that's the best exercise, and that will save, like you said, you want to increase the odds of success for entrepreneurs. The passion and the alignment for what you do, I think, will take care of a lot of that. And there are also the challenges if there's people that own a business doing this too, because Gino, I've talked to people where what happens, and I wonder if there's a correlation between that biz match and what I'm about to say, is that I interview people where they wake up and then the analogy was this, and I woke up one day and I felt like I had a noose around my neck because the passion was gone. And then they did crazy things to get out of the business. And I wonder if there's a correlation to I hated copiers, Gino, so much. So then that's why I wanted to build out the managed IT, because I wanted to be valuable to people, not just giving them a box. So it was like I was probably fighting gravity. And I don't know if there's challenges in the, first and second generation with having different biz matches, but like even identifying that and having that be part of their core strategy is probably something that a lot of people haven't intentionally done, even if they have a company.
Yeah, so you are 100% right. And that's the point I'm hoping comes through. And what you prompted for me is a thought, so when I took over my family business and turned that business around, very similar to your story, I had to spin off a couple business units. And so what clicked for me there is the first thing I spun off was distribution. And it's because I had utter disdain for staring at all that inventory, all that money sitting there. And so with that, we outsourced that. It was masterful. It helped the turnaround. It was great. But that I did that because, again, that's what I'm built for. Another person running that business may have kept it because they love that kind of stuff. And so this is where you're going to make decisions as an entrepreneur and an individual that fit with what you're built for.
So when you think about, if we're following the flow here and you've identified, you're an entrepreneur, you're identifying what is the right business fit, et cetera. What are some of the things that you talk about in your book, the mistakes that people make, and like as entrepreneurs that you're trying to help people avoid? And I think you said there are 8 of them, so maybe you want to kind of run through them, and then I don't know if you want to pull out a couple and give some examples.
Yeah, and so I'll run through them, and you tell me if 1 or 2 jump out for you, because you know your audience better than I know your audience. But leading into this, what I do in this chapter is I share a day in the life of an entrepreneur. And so what I want your audience to see is what it looks like when it's great. I call it the dream scenario. And what it looks like when it's horrible, I call the nightmare scenario. And truth be told, most entrepreneurs are living the nightmare scenario. That's how I was able to build what I built with EOS Worldwide, helping entrepreneurs get out of their nightmare scenario. And through all of that experience for the last 30 years, I realized there's about 8 common mistakes that every one of these entrepreneurs make during their startup phase that we're basically repairing and correcting and solving much later on when you don't have to make this mistake. And so the 8 mistakes are, and so picture this as the listener, you're about to start a business, please, here we go. The mistakes are not having a vision, hiring the wrong person, not spending time with your people, not knowing who your customer is, not charging enough, not staying true to your core, not knowing your numbers, and not crystallizing roles and responsibilities. And any of those would be a blast to talk about, but you tell me 1 or 2 that jumps out for you.
I'd say let's start. I mean, I don't know if you actually had those in order, but of importance or anything, but like the vision, I think is one thing that is near and dear to my heart, Gino, because I actually have this point in my my presentation, my keynote that I give, where I say Google Maps is one of the most powerful tools on the planet. But what happens if you don't plug in point B? Nothing. Yeah. And then I say, if you plug in point B, for me, in the kind of the philosophy I preach is it's not just a revenue target. So it might be $10 to $15 million. It might be part of it, but like, what is the vision, and what is your definition of a vision, and what is it that people do the right way in order to crystallize what that is?
Yeah, you bet. Great. So with that, I always like to give a little bit of context. So this vision piece, this vision conversation, there are 8 aspects to a vision, in my opinion. And so with that, every tool I describe, it can be downloaded on the website. It's free. Again, e-leap.com. So it's a tool called My Vision Clarifier. And what it's forcing, your listener to do is really hunker down and think about these 8 aspects of their vision. And so what happens is the entrepreneur takes their leap and they have it in their head, a relatively good idea, but they're going forward, building this business, adding people, and they're just not getting it out of their head on paper so that all their people know what the vision is.
Where are we going?
So to think about what is the passion here? Who is the customer here? What is our pricing model? Who are we serving? And so it really, and then it starts to boil it down to the nitty gritty. What is the 10-year goal? And then boiling it down to what needs to get done in the next 90 days. And so it's really forcing it out of their head on paper so everyone can see it, so that everyone's rowing in the same direction.
So, Gino, from the people that haven't started a business or the people that have, when you think about, because of so many people that are on the show that say I accidentally became an entrepreneur, how do you bridge that gap? Like, if someone that intentionally has gone through like something like your book versus like what I see to be a common trend of people that just accidentally became. So they're trying to build the vision while they've already left. I mean, what's the disconnect there?
Well, it's not a disconnect. It's those 6 essential traits. And so when you start to tie together everything I'm sharing with you here, and by the way, I forgot to also mention, your listeners can go take the Entrepreneur in the Making assessment. So they can go online, take this assessment for free, and see how they score in regards to these 6 essential traits. But the point is, it all starts with a person with those 6 essential traits. And so if you have them, you're just drawn to, wanting to make money, having ideas, connecting dots in the world. And so, typically growing up, you sold candy, you shoveled snow, you sold t-shirts, you had money-making ideas your whole life since you were 10 years old. And so that being, that entity, that ball of energy that has those 6 essential traits, they're going to find themselves doing something. Yeah. What I'm trying to help them do is I'm just trying to help them now harness that energy into a more effective way of building something, because that's what I love. It's every time a successful entrepreneur reads this book, they go, holy crap, I wish I would have had this 20 years ago, this 30 years ago, because that's what they're saying. They just went with their natural DNA and ended up with a business. Now it can be a little more purposeful, heading it off at the pass with this powerful tool, this powerful content to help these new entrepreneurs now learn from, the million of us that came before them. So I don't know if that answers the question.
It does. And I think that goes into then, okay, and it really does. I think that the point is like, you're going to end up doing that anyways. So you might as well have a little bit of planning and putting all this stuff on the paper.
Exactly right. Because with those 6 essential traits, you're unemployable. So you're going to go do something anyway. You might as well, do something that you're built.
Oh God, I actually called it professionally unemployable. They're like, "What do you do?" I'm like, so I tell the story where like after we sold our business, they put me in a cube in the middle of the bullpen next to an intern. And I was like, are you serious? Like, how is this going to work? And then it's just like, it literally was 60 days. But so I digress. But going back to your point, when the people that have, people's such a huge part of all of this, regardless of the size of the company, whether you've started or haven't started, I know you've got, this ties a little bit into EOS and how you've got your people analyzer and the accountability chart. But like when you're starting up and you're trying to build this foundation, and as a company evolves, I don't know if if you maybe can explain the Peter principle, but it's so hard to find the right people, the right spots in different stages. And how do you, what's your thoughts, and maybe you can kind of expand on the people part?
Yeah. And so the people part, what I'm speaking to with this book, because now all of a sudden we're going to bring EOS into this conversation, because the whole mission with Entrepreneurial Leap is to take that person who thinks they might be an entrepreneur or believes that they are, take them to the point of leap, take them to the point of startup, the day they generate $1. Once they generate $1, then they need a EOS. Once they start to bring on employees, they need EOS. And so what I'm specifically speaking to about hiring the wrong people is during startup, what an entrepreneur typically does is all of a sudden they've sold a few things, they're getting busy, they're at capacity, and they have to throw a person at this problem. And what they do is they grab the closest person they can find, which is typically mom, dad, brother, sister, friend, cousin, whatever it is, and throw them at the problem. And they throw them at the problem without deciding, is this the right person for this organization? And so you get them thinking about what are their core values so that they're culturally bringing in the right person, and certainly skill set. But so it's just forcing some pre-thought, because our clients with EOS that come to us, when they have 10 to 250 employees, all of a sudden they kept throwing people at problems. And now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, they're literally getting rid of 20 to 40% of their people because they all don't fit. They just were kept throwing people at problems. And so it's heading it off at the pass. And then again, for the very specific hiring, firing, reviewing, rewarding, recognizing around core values and GWC and the people analyzer, that's all EOS stuff.
Yep.
When that entrepreneur starts to really build and grow an amazing business.
No, and I've gone through literally in this bit in my current business, the people thing is you're trying to find different people to slot in there. And it's hard. I mean, it's, and I don't know if it's here or later on in the book when you're talking about partners, and maybe that's, when you're talking about the visionary integrator. And so someone that is, I don't know if that's the right spot for this, but like, I think that's an important decision to be made, right? Should you go by yourself? Do you need different people sit next to you? And I don't know if you want to kind of expand on that.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why I wanted to give your listener the context first, because you're actually now dipping into some path stuff, and maybe we should
let's go into
it toward path. But in path, what I share are the 9 stages of building your company. And so there is no perfect process. There is no perfect system for starting up and building your business. And anybody that tells you there is, they're trying to sell you something. And so these 9 stages, I try to put them as best I can in a linear fashion, but it's not linear. And so one of those 9 stages is for you as the entrepreneur to decide when you need to bring an integrator in. And so there's a book that Mark Winters and I wrote called Rocket Fuel, and it describes the phenomenon of how every visionary entrepreneur needs to be counterbalanced with an integrator. And the integrator runs the day-to-day to free that visionary entrepreneur up to grow the business to the next level. And so somewhere on the journey, some entrepreneurs are savvy enough to start their business with their integrator in place because they know this dynamic and they want to get a huge jump start on that dynamic. And sometimes they start as partners. Sometimes that entrepreneur just hires that person. Pretty sophisticated when they do that. Or somewhere between 0 revenue to 100 million in revenue, that visionary entrepreneur is going to need an integrator. And so it's just this awareness that says, head it off at the pass. As soon as you reach capacity, or running the day-to-day is exhausting you, that's your trigger to go out and get your integrator. And I have clients that have done it from 0 to literally 100 million, and it's all based on when that entrepreneur is ready to pull that trigger.
So, the integrate drive, I'm a visionary too, so I can't tie my shoes without some help. So if you kind of going into this path section, maybe give a little bit more background on the path, and then, I think I don't want to go down too much of a rabbit hole, but I love how you address college, because I'm very passionate about education, Gino, and I've realized, because I was an okay student, but like I have got a thirst for knowledge since, and I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs where if they have the big picture, they can learn this stuff. So, between college and then your passion and and how that all ties together, maybe I think it's very intriguing that you're addressing this.
Yeah, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to touch on again each part of path really quick. I'm going to give you just 15 seconds or less on each one, and then I'll hit your college question, because I'm also curious what in this you feel is best for your listener to hear more about. And so in this whole path part of the book, first thing which we're about to talk about is college or not. It's just a choice, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. From there, the power of passion. And this chapter is all about how to discover your passion, why passion is so vital. You will not succeed without passion long term. From there, we then go into mentoring and how to find a mentor and the power of having a mentor and how that will increase your odds of success. From there, I then go, the next chapter is all about taking action, but being patient, and the power of 10-year thinking, the power behind 10-year thinking, the science behind it, and what it does for you. And then from there, we get into those 8 disciplines I talked about for increasing your odds, and then those 9 stages that we quickly touched on. So to your question,
I think the college one's really important, because I think it's so interesting in today's world too.
Yeah, and it's near and dear to my heart. And so it's called college or not, because it truly is a choice. And obviously who we're talking to here is anyone at the age where they have to decide, college or not. And so typically if you've got a 35-year-old listening, it's probably not even a question for them.
So also, Gino, sorry to interrupt you. Don't you think it's also kind of important for maybe an entrepreneur that has a potential second gen? That's someone that's saying, okay, is my kid an entrepreneur, and is this the right approach?
Of course. Yeah. So please, and again, with your audience, I'm assuming we're talking to an entrepreneur in the making, but very much so. This content, this book is for a parent of an entrepreneur in the making to help them. It's also for mentors and organizations that teach help entrepreneurs. So absolutely, yes. And so with that, I'll give you a couple of statistics. So first of all, the small business statistics are that 44% of small business owners have a college degree, okay, which means 56% do not have a college degree. So that's a really important statistic. The next one is, as I went into this, I really thought I was going to be writing a bit of an anti-college book, because what I did for the first 20 years is I asked one of my clients that was a college graduate MBA, I said, do you use anything from your degree as an entrepreneur? And the answer in every case was no. So, how does that not make me biased? I did not go to college. I was smart enough to know for myself that it was not for me, but I really thought, hearing that answer, why would an entrepreneur go to college? But then what I started doing about 10 or 15 years ago is asking a follow-up question. And that was, if you knew everything you knew now, would you go back to college? And they almost always said yes. So that made me say, holy crap, why?
Yeah, interesting.
And the answers were about, it had nothing to do with the education. It had nothing to do with the content. It was, number one, about relationships. And so the relationships they formed, and the bonds, and their peers, and the relationships they have later in life that have served them. Number two, they talked about how it was a great testing ground, improving ground for them to sell stuff to fellow students and practice business ideas and things like that. So not at all what college was intended for, but that's the reason. And so the point is, and then what I do is I give a list of what successful entrepreneurs recommend classes you should take if you are going to go to college. So the point is, it's a choice you must make. You're becoming successful as an entrepreneur is not going to be dependent on whether you went to college or not. So now you just make a decision. Is it smart for you to go? And I think half the people will choose yes and half will choose no, and there's no bad answer. And when in doubt, you should probably go to college, because we live in a society, it's shifting now finally, but if you don't have a degree, man, you get that look. I've gotten that look for 32 straight years. And it's painful, but that's okay. I pushed through it. I didn't let it stop me. But anyway, it's a choice you have to make. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Well, and I think, there's a constant theme here, Gino, is it's intentionality, right? Like, if you look up and you just do stuff instead of having people tell you what to do, and then you can just assess whether it makes sense for you or not. And that I think that leads into the next concept that I love in your past section, which is the 10-year thinking. And what's interesting to me is when I interviewed John Warlow, he was my third interview on the show 3.5 years ago. And it was literally called 10-year chunks. So it's interesting that you guys both have some common thinking behind it. But why 10 years? And then why 10 years? And then what is it that people should be thinking about?
Yeah, that's great. And I want to back up. There's one more thing I really want to say about this whole college or not, and this education point, because you just touched on it about 10 minutes ago, is, when I look at the last 30 years, I have spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars on educating myself. So the point I'm making here is I learned how to get educated my way.
Right.
I don't educate well in academia. And so my point is, for that listener, is if you don't go to college, you still have to go get educated your way. So you don't get let off the hook. You've got to be a fanatic about learning. So
and it's so interesting, Gino, just back on that point. So I listened to a book a week on Audible. When I had discovered Audible a handful of years ago, I was like, I actually retain most of this instead of like a black and white textbook that someone says, read this. And I'm like, why? So I think it's just in today's world, you can literally learn whatever you want between podcasts and videos and for free for the most part.
Absolutely. And I give a laundry list of ways to learn in one of the later chapters in the book, because I call it a lifetime of learning. And so, yes, there's so many ways to learn out there now. You just have to pick your way. And again, there's a laundry list of them. And they're also listed on the website as well for free.
So go ahead.
So to your question about 10-year thinking, and so I learned this when I was 35 years old. And the point I'm trying to make here is, if you are someone with these 6 essential traits, unfortunately, you are genetically encoded to be incredibly impatient and want everything now. Okay. And so that's what I did until I was 35. What I learned is, as soon as I started thinking in 10-year timeframes, 10-year goals, time literally slowed down for me. I actually accomplished more. I actually got there faster. And so when you have that urgency and you're wanting everything to happen now, within the next 12 months, boom, 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 you're just trying to do too much. Your thinking is short-sighted. You're Band-Aid fixing a lot of stuff. When you look out and you plan in 10-year timeframes, you just tend to think better, less stress, less pressure, better decisions. And as I said, time literally slows down. And the reality is you can accomplish just about anything in 10 years, worst case, 20 years. And then the last little point is there's a great business axiom that says all overnight successes take 20 years. And so the point there is there's not much you can build in less than 10 years. And so it pains me when there's these articles written about somebody who built $1 billion company in 2 years. It fucks up the thinking in the entrepreneurial world. Respect.
And it gives anxiety to everybody that's just in the grind. I mean, it's just like you get, because a lot of entrepreneurs probably, I mean, I do, like, and every people I know do, compare yourselves to other people. And then I think you mentioned in your book, you're just like about your clients that you've had where it's all a shitload of work. I talked to this guy I presented to EO last week, and he goes, "Yep, another 20-year overnight success." It's just, there is no silver bullet to it.
Exactly. And then here's the beauty, so let's pretend one of your listeners listening right now is 18. I mean, to me, this is comical because that 18-year-old, if they just set a 10-year goal by 28, they're going to be 28, and they will have achieved a 10-year goal with literally at least 72 years left to live. Okay. Because they're living to, any 18-year-old is living past 100. So you got 72 years left. What on earth is it you want by 21, knowing that you've got 80 great years left? And so just think about what you can accomplish. And it's about enjoying that journey. Just enjoy that ride and achieve that 10-year goal, and then set another and another. And you've got 70 opportunities. And now let's go to the 50-year-old listening that realizes they're an entrepreneur. They're going to achieve something by 60, and then they've got probably 20 good years left, if not 40 more years. And so they've got enough time to reset at least 2 more 10-year goals. So anyway, for what that's worth, it's a way of enjoying the ride, slowing down, less stress, and accomplishing a hell of a lot more. That's the irony.
Well, and do you have any advice of what should comprise of that 10-year goal? Because going back to it maybe should, my opinion, shouldn't necessarily just be profits or top line revenue. I mean, what other things would be, variables that you would consider?
Yeah, no, so what I would urge, I mean, it can be revenue, it can be profit. And I see a lot of those. But to me, I'll give it a real life example, which is mine currently right now, is I want to impact 1 million entrepreneurs in the making in the next 10 years. So that's the goal. And that's what's driving me every day. And I'm being very methodical about doing things every day that move me closer to that. The previous goal in building EOS worldwide was 10,000 companies running on EOS. And so there are 2 examples. So for me, it's never been about revenue. The money always follows, and there's plenty of money if you do it well and right and just follow everything I prescribe in this book. With that said, I would urge that it be about the impact you want to make.
Yep.
But it's okay. I mean, if at the end of the day that person is motivated about building a $100 million company, amen and hallelujah. That's what motivates them. So it does not have to be revenue, does not have to be profit, and most of the time it's not.
I agree with you, and I also I think it's if there's any feedback or not feedback, but any insights for the listeners is I interviewed Norm Brodsky. His whole goal is $100 million. $100 million. He had 3,000 employees. He wasn't making anything. The fax machines came around, and he lost everything. So it's an intentional goal that is well rounded. I think you definitely need revenue and profits, but it all is intertwined. You can't look at one within a vacuum. Otherwise, you're going to miss some significant, or feel some significant pain, which kind of goes into.
What I would urge and ask is, go to the root of your passion. And so what is the real passion? And make the 10-year target something around that impact, that passion, that dent you want to put in the universe. And I think that's going to really energize that 10-year goal.
Yeah, that's super good advice. Yeah, any ideas of I don't know if you mentioned you had a worksheet on how to identify your passion?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so there's a whole chapter on it. And, the one exercise I would suggest here, which was one that had a big impact on my life. So I give, again, it's a whole chapter on, I've sent them to a couple websites, exercises they can do, tools they can take. But this one it's a 30-minute exercise. They can do it sitting in a coffee shop, a library, but it's got to be a quiet place where they're able to think with no distractions. Totally undivided quiet time for 30 minutes, and you answer 3 questions. And so the first question you answer is, what are my 3 greatest successes? And then obviously you answer that. Number 2, you answer, what are my 3 greatest failures? And please be very honest with yourself there. And then question 3, you answer, what has life prepared me for? And out of that, you're going to get some real clarity around your genetic encoding, what you're passionate about, what you're built for. And so that was a great exercise that was really
I like that a lot. I like that a lot. So then, kind of as we're trailing to the end here, you got 8 disciplines for increasing your odds. And, as you mentioned in the book, as things iterate, you did it with EOS. And I've gone through a couple of these in my business, and it's been really painful. It's like your business model and how you're changing it. And like, so what are the disciplines of, what can someone do to make sure that they're actually going to succeed?
Well, so I'll do the same thing I did with the mistakes. I'll read the 8 disciplines, and then you tell me which one you want to drill down on. And so they are, number 1, clarify your vision. Number 2, decide if you are a partner person. Number 3, know that the bigger the problem you solve in the world, the more successful you will be. Number 4, get feedback from customers and clients early and often. Number 5, know that your first plan will not be your final plan. Number 6, work hard, really hard. Number 7, take criticism and doubt from others with a grain of salt. And number 8, see it every night.
All right. So I like the number 3 because I think that ties to your 10-year target, because maybe I'll give my personal experience of I have very large visions that I want to accomplish that gives me underlying anxiety of not being there, which I think is very applicable to your 10-year targets and having time slow down. But how do you balance the having such a big vision and like maybe define like how you create that vision and how it's bigger than just a business and then how you actually manage that?
Well, you said number 3, which is no, the bigger the problem you solve in the world, the more successful you will be. Is that the one you're asking about?
Yep.
Perfect. So, well, you tell me if this answers your question, because what I'm saying in this discipline, which if your listener could burn this into their bones, it'll change you forever. And it's just this basic understanding of the more value you bring to the world, the more you're worth and the more money you'll make. So simply put, if you cut a lawn, that's worth $25. So you're worth $25 if that's what you do, cut people's lawns. If you populate Mars, you're worth $1 trillion. That's worth $1 trillion, okay? And so somewhere on that spectrum of value is where all businesses lie. And if you're sitting there pissed off and scratching your head because you're not making enough money, well, bottom line is you're not creating enough value. You're not solving a big enough problem in the world. And so the bigger the problem you solve, the more value you bring, the more successful you're going to be.
Okay, so how do you relate that and combine that with number 4, which is get feedback from your customers early and often, and then reconcile, is so with number 4, and I'm going back to there was a specific story you were talking about in your book about the crazier everybody thinks you are, the more you're on track to have a very successful business. So how do you reconcile with, I think it was a story of like 7 people on the board thought it was crazy and it sounded like a good idea, and 10 people thought it was, and it was a really good idea. How do you take your vision and your big vision, and that might be crazy, getting feedback and trying to accomplish that vision without not making money or without having a failure of a business? Does that make sense? I don't know.
Frankly, it doesn't, but it does. Okay. It makes sense to me because I speak entrepreneur, and right now you're talking visionary entrepreneur. So what you just literally did is rolled 3 disciplines into one. And so I'm going to break them apart and hopefully this will really help your So the first part is, there is a distinct difference between number 3 and number 4, because number 3 is about, again, this point I'm making, the bigger problem you solve, the more value you have. So you got to first and foremost understand about the fact that you must create value. And so if you're doing $25 an hour work, you are worth 40 grand a year. Your business is going to make 40 grand a year, 50 grand. That's it. And so it's just a basic philosophy that you have to burn into your bones and your soul. Number 4, getting feedback from customers and clients early is completely different, but there's certainly a tie, but it's completely different, where that says so let's pretend you invent a flying car and bring it to market tomorrow. You're going to be a trillionaire doing that right now as well. Obviously, there aren't any, but we're getting close. So my point there is that is something that's incredibly valuable. You're going to be successful with that economically. But now what you have to do is you have to constantly get feedback from your customers and your clients. And so the discipline just says, everything that you do and create, make sure the people that pay you money for that thing are giving you feedback. The mistake here is the entrepreneur keeps seeing what their spouse thinks and their mom thinks and their sister thinks, and they're saying, "Oh, honey, it's beautiful, it's great, it's going to be wonderful." That means nothing. And so you got to get feedback constantly from the people that are paying you money. And if those people, the way they give you their feedback is by cutting a check. If they're not cutting you a check or they stop cutting you a check, then that's an indicator that there's something wrong with what you've created. And or, assuming they paid for it, get feedback constantly, because when it changes, and it always changes, the value changes, the competition comes in and kicks your ass, the closer you keep your ear to the ground with the customer or client, you're going to be able to evolve and make that change quickly and continue to increase that value. And then the third thing you're bringing up is criticism and doubt from others, where this is completely different. And I can see where you see a thread in there is this is the entrepreneur that says they're going to go do this thing, and their spouse tells them they're crazy, and their dad tells them they're crazy, and their friend tells them they're crazy. And so they're listening to all of this horrible feedback, because the reality is your listener out there that has an idea, if you go tell 100 people your idea, 90 of them are going to tell you you're crazy. And so with that, the story you're alluding to is a very successful, well-known entrepreneur that I can't say his name because I can't find the facts that this is about him, but I'm told it is. What he would do is he would assemble this board of 10 really intelligent people, and he would present them with his ideas. And when 7 out of 10 hated it, he knew he had a winner. When 10 out of 10 hated it, he knew it was revolutionary. And so the point here is you, the entrepreneur, you got to take that criticism and doubt from others with a grain of salt, because most people in your life are going to tell you you're crazy. Most people in your life are not genetically encoded like you. And so take the feedback, but take it with a grain of salt, and then go with what your gut is telling you at the end of the day.
I love it. Because that is the mind game that you're prepping people for.
Exactly.
Because the 6 inches between your ears can potentially be some of the more challenging warfare battles, or the battlegrounds, than anything else that's out there.
And the same, and for what it's worth, when I presented my idea for what I wanted to create with EOS to a group, and it's ironic because it was a group of about 10 successful entrepreneurs, everyone but one told me I was crazy. And so all that did was motivated me. So on that note, as people are going to take the leap and experience that thing, Gino, and then there's probably, you're probably going to reference a bunch of the stuff we covered, but it's probably all of it. If you're trying to accomplish that vision, take the criticism for a grain of salt, but also make money, get checks from your clients, and just constantly reiterate to make sure that it's something that you can actually succeed at. So that way they're not right. I mean, it's not for the faint of heart. I know that. It is not. And that's why, so this isn't about, do you have the 6 essential traits? Because if you do, you're really cool and life's going to be great and everyone else sucks. It's just the opposite. Being an entrepreneur is freaking hard. And so I'm trying to talk anybody out of this journey that doesn't have them, because it's going to be hell. And it is hell for the entrepreneur. I mean, you get your ass kicked every day. You get 1 win for every 10 losses. And then you emerge after 10 years of getting your ass kicked, a successful entrepreneur. Hopefully you're doing something that you're more likely to fail than succeed at. It's really hard. It's not all it's cracked up to be. It's not this glamorous thing. And so that's why the media makes me crazy, because they make it sound so glamorous. Listen, I wouldn't trade it for anything, but you got to have these traits to really enjoy that freaking craziness.
So if you were sitting across from 18-year-old Gino, and obviously you're handing him the book, but what would be like maybe 1 or 2 points what would you say to yourself?
Well, what I would say to myself is something different, because you're saying I'm handing me the book. So the good news is right. So I'm about to get this resource that has all of the answers and all of the lessons that I need at 18. And so what I would tell myself, knowing myself now, years later, and how long it took me to understand what I'm about to say, I would say, here, read this book, do everything in this book. And in addition to all of that, be yourself, be real, be vulnerable, and fuck what everybody else thinks. And man, if I could have done that at 18, holy shit. And so, I want to say it took me until I was 25 or 30 to get that. I almost want to say it took me until last year to get that. So I'm still trying to get that. But man, if we can all be real, raw, vulnerable, down to earth, authentic, and not give a shit what anybody thinks, and just let our freak flags fly, the world would be a better place.
Oh my gosh, I want to live in that world.
Well, I feel like I am. It took a long time.
Well, and that's, I think, kind of your point about talking to your younger self, is you can do that. And, I just on a little comment on that. I remember when I was going through the family business and we were going through the shitstorm, and there was one day, Gino, I woke up and I was like, no one knows what they're doing, really. I was just like, everybody's kind of just, making decisions, hoping shit works. And so I think it's I don't know, it's near and dear to my heart. This has been so fun. I'm so appreciative that you came on the show and were able to share the new book. And anybody that's, whether you have a business or not, and whether you're about to think about it, I can't recommend it enough. What is the best way to find all the resources? I know you mentioned it all and they'll all be in the show notes, but maybe you want to give it another run.
Yeah, you bet. So the book is called Entrepreneurial Leap. You can buy it at any major retailer. So, most people are buying it on Amazon, but any major retailer has it. You can go to the website, which is e-leap.com, and that's where you will find a free chapter of the book, the free assessment that you can take to see if you have the 6 essential traits. You can download every tool that I've talked about there. It's a complete resource center. You can sign up for the newsletter, lots of content coming out every week. And so those would be the 2 resources I would offer.
It has been a blast. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Gino.
My pleasure, Ryan. Had a blast as well.